Is an 80-year-old in priority need? Now, this is a question that came in through a bit of a private message, basically, so it's not in the comment section, and it related to a family situation, but I thought the theory behind old age in priority need is something which is worth saying. It's a real quick one to say. So within the Housing Act, it mentions old age as potentially being a source of vulnerability or source of priority needs. But basically, the guidance goes on to say that there is no cut-off point. So you're not automatically in priority need once you hit your 65th birthday or something like that. Essentially, it's kind of, it all comes down to the facts of the case, which means that you might have a 70-year-old Ranulph Fiennes type who's like proper Arctic explorer or whatever, who might be 70 years old, but he's very, very robust and resilient. And you might have a 50-year-old who actually is very, very frail, potentially for a number of different reasons. So really, again, in one sense, you're kind of treating it like a medical issue, so the question to the GP would be, how is that person's health? Obviously the older you get, the kind of more health conditions you tend to pick up, but that kind of idea of frailty, that would kind of come into it as well. If you've got somebody who's over 65, then you can potentially get them a service with the older people's team, where you can certainly ask for a Section 9 Care Act assessment for them. But ultimately, I cannot imagine for a second that a council would try and say an 80-year-old is not in priority need, although I'm sure it has happened once or twice. For an 80-year-old, it's probably going to be a pretty straightforward kind of decision. As I say, for a 70-year-old or a 60-year-old, it kind of gets a bit more tricky. Generally speaking, and again, my experience is based in Bedford Borough, people who are over 55 or over 60, there tends to be far more accommodation available, sheltered accommodation, that sort of thing, warden controlled. So in Bedford Borough, I think there's actually quite a lot of voids most of the time. So if you're over 55 or over 60, there doesn't tend to be that much difficulty in getting housed anyway, even if you don't have local connection, or even if you don't meet the other kind of criteria with Part 6 applications. So again, I remember a guy, one of the first people we helped, actually, I'd known him for years because I used to work at a night shelter and knew him from there, and he'd been around the country, travelling around, and we got him housed within 2 hours, literally, because he had some health issues, and because he was over 55, they were like, literally, they're crying out for people to come in, and move in. It would get a bit more tricky if you've got kind of families where you've got, an older person amongst younger people as well, because I don't think that you'd be able to kind of get sheltered accommodation in the same way. And something I don't think I've actually said about vulnerability elsewhere is that if anyone in your household is vulnerable, then the whole household's in priority needs. So, the applicant, so, for example, if you've got a family of 4 and the mum is applying for it in her name, she doesn't have to be in priority need. It might be that one of the children or one of the partner or something is in priority need, and then the whole that makes the whole family. So if you've got an 80-year-old in your household, then the whole family is going to be in priority need, assuming that, as I say, they're not Ranulph Fiennes and they're not sprightly and whatever. So hopefully that helps. Keep the questions